Good evening and thanks for joining us. This is NTD Business. I'm Paul Graney. More people filed for state unemployment benefits last week. Meanwhile, states are facing delays because of fraud. California says it'll stop processing new applications for 2 weeks. Hundreds of billions of dollars from the CARES Act are still untouched. A senator asks if there's a better way for it to be put to use. TikTok files an application in China to export technology. It's hoping to close the Oracle deal soon. And Eurozone banks are facing a wave of loan defaults in emerging markets. We asked Chief Economist Daniel Akaya if there's a crisis on the horizon in 2021. We start this evening with a look at the weekly jobless numbers, where the number of Americans filing new unemployment claims has actually risen slightly. A sure sign the labor market is struggling to recover.
The Labor Department says 870,000 people filed for state unemployment benefits last week. That's up 4,000 from a week earlier. Claims have dropped substantially after hitting a record peak of over 6.8 million at the end of March. Now they're stuck at elevated levels. Job cuts have spread to industries such as financial services and technology. They weren't initially impacted by the business closures in mid-March. The number of people continuing to receive unemployment benefits dropped by over 167,000 for the week ending September 12th. The steady decline in continuing claims likely means some workers are being rehired as the country reopens. Another factor driving that number down could be that regular jobless aid, which lasts 6 months in most states, has run out.
California says it will stop processing new applications for 2 weeks. It's trying to reduce backlogs and stop phony claims. Pennsylvania says up to 10,000 inmates are improperly collecting aid. One expert says the biggest threat is international fraud rings. They often use stolen identities to apply for benefits. Washington was the first state to be hit by one such ring. It managed to steal up to $650 million in jobless payments. The bogus applications, large backlogs, and misconducts have made unemployment benefit data a less reliable measure of the nation's job market. And today, Jerome Powell and Steven Mnuchin said $200 billion of federal aid from the CARES Act is still unused. They say it could be reallocated to help American businesses and workers. The Federal Reserve's lending program for small businesses is significantly underused. Powell estimates by the end of the year we'll just have used $10 to $30 billion out of an allocated $600 billion. At the hearing, lawmakers pressed Powell about how the money should be used.
What's the single higher and better use?
To me, it would be PPP, and it would be PPP, and then after that, I would say something more for those who remain unemployed.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, do you disagree or agree with that?
No, I do agree with that. Not just that money, but the $200 billion that I have on the sidelines.
The PPP program has now expired with $130 billion left. Mnuchin says it would be his first priority to get approval from Congress to tap and send it to needy firms. And in other news, thousands of landlords have joined a lawsuit filed against the CDC. The lawsuit targets the CDC's freeze on evictions until the end of the year. Bad news if you're struggling to repay your mortgage. It's meant to help prevent tenants from being kicked out of their homes if they're suffering a financial burden because of the pandemic. But a lawyer representing the case told us the CDC is putting landlords in a tough spot. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the story.
The new Civil Liberties Alliance says that although the CDC is trying to help tenants in financially tight situations, it only pushes the burden onto the landlords.
If you have someone who just has 1 or 2 rental units, they're not necessarily a wealthy person. In fact, this may be the way that they put bread on the table for their families, is by having a few rental units, and they count on that income in order to pay their bills and put a roof over their heads. And so
Chenoweth represents the landlords in the lawsuit. He says the lawsuit is crucial to protecting landlords' rights and livelihoods. Currently, there is no federal assistance for landlords, but some states offer assistance. Under the CDC's new eviction freeze declaration, tenants that earn less than $99,000 per year and are facing financial pressure are protected from being evicted. But the tenants had to have tried to get government assistance before they get protection under the CDC's order. Chenoweth says that in some cases, the tenants were behind on rent even before the pandemic. And some people may take advantage of the eviction halt, even if they are able to pay rent.
If you start allowing these constitutional shortcuts and you start allowing federal agencies to abuse administrative power, then you run into major civil liberties problems very, very quickly.
The CDC argues that it has the authority to act under the circumstances of the pandemic. But Chenoweth says the CDC has no legal authority to interfere with the business between landlords and tenants.
Preventing a healthy person from being evicted from a premises just on the theory that that might increase the chances of them spreading COVID or getting COVID is well beyond the scope of the authority that the CDC is given.
Since the pandemic started, some states have issued temporary eviction bans, but the CDC's new declaration requires all states to freeze evictions until the end of the year. Chenoweth tells us his team is still investigating how many states will be affected by the declaration. Reporting by Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The lawyer did propose one solution for federal agencies to have the states handle eviction on a case-by-case basis. And the new survey says paying bills on time is a top priority for many Americans, even over saving money, which comes in at number 2. We asked people in New York how their spending habits might have changed during the pandemic. NTD's Phil Zoe reports.
A new report from Bankrate shows 46% of Americans consider paying bills on time their top priority. That's the highest percentage recorded in the last 8 years. Coming in second was saving more money with 28%. We spoke to Bankrate's chief financial analyst, Greg McBride.
The majority of Americans are focused on one of two financial priorities, either staying current or getting caught up on the bills or saving more money. I think
saving and paying bills on time, because if I fall behind on the bills, then my economy situation is going to get worse. And saving because we don't know what's looming after the pandemic.
The report said paying your bills on time is a top priority across the board, regardless of age or income. At least 7 out of every 10 people said they've made progress on their financial priorities. One person says she always pays her bill on time to avoid penalties.
Yeah, paying bills, because I don't want to be hit up with any penalty fees, and I just want to stay on track and make sure everybody gets paid.
And across the income spectrum, people still say that their top financial priority is just staying current or getting caught up on the bills. And that's the number one answer, whether you're a high-income household or a low-income household.
Another person says she's saving money by buying items when they're on sale.
Buy things when they're on sale. Grocery prices have gone up really high, so I'm trying to avoid buying things that I don't really need or trying to buy things when they're on sale.
More than 70% of Americans say they are making progress, even among those that are focused on paying the bills. About 2/3 said that they had made progress on that.
Someone said he stopped buying luxury items and is only spending on necessities.
We take away some of the luxuries that we normally afford ourselves, such as vacations. That's a secondary thing. And then we also try to tighten the belt a little bit around the house and not, spoil ourselves very often.
Another person says she pays all her bills and is saving more money by cooking at home.
The grocery shopping, a lot of cooking, we ended up saving at least probably 20% to 30% more.
Paying down debt and helping out friends and family round out the top 4 choices. Phil Zoe, NTD News, New York.
Co-working giant WeWork is selling a majority stake in its Chinese subsidiary. A fresh $200 million investment makes TrustBridge Partners the new majority shareholder. WeWork is cutting costs globally after a botched IPO last year. Some alleged unruly behavior from its former CEO Adam Neumann, like giving staff tequila shots after discussing layoffs, spooked potential investors as it might. Neumann was then paid almost $2 billion to step down. WeWork opened its first Chinese location in Shanghai in 2016, now operates more than 100 locations there in 12 different cities. And TikTok's owner ByteDance in China has applied for a Chinese tech license for export. It's racing to seal the deal with Oracle and Walmart in hopes that it will end the US government's plans to ban TikTok on national security grounds. China's Ministry of Commerce introduced new rules for tech export last month. Analysts say it gives the Chinese regime a say over any TikTok deal and could take up to 30 days to get initial approval to export such technology. A Chinese government spokesman says ByteDance's application will be handled according to relevant regulations. And in market news today, Walmart rallied in quite a rocky session. Beaten down technology stocks, it rose today, except for truck company Nikola. It slid again. S&P's Home Builders Index climbed as sales of new single-family homes rose to their highest level in nearly 14 years in August. Would you believe? The Dow rose over 52 points, or 0.2%. S&P 500 gained nearly 10 points, or 0.3%. And the Nasdaq added over 39 points, or 0.37%. European bank shares are falling more than the market this week. There are fears of weaker solvency because of non-performing loans in emerging markets. European banks invested heavily in places like Mexico, Turkey and Brazil to diversify their portfolios. Now these countries are really suffering economically. Ask Daniel Akaya about it. He's the chief economist at the Tressis hedge fund in Europe. He says there will need to be more money put aside for potential bad loans, or what are called loan provisions. I asked him if he thinks we're in for an even bigger financial shock in 2021.
One thing is inevitable, is that provisions will have to be larger than what consensus has in their numbers. Banks have been very, very weak in equity markets. European banks are suffering immensely, both from negative rates and the policy, despite their slow and gradual improvement of core capital. But provisions will have to be larger. And also, it is going to be very, very difficult for these banks to continue to strengthen their balance sheet and at the same time lend more and in more risky ways to the real economy in a slowdown of, as we are seeing right now, of both the services sector and the manufacturing sector in the Eurozone. So this is how you create sometimes a credit crunch. The credit crunch doesn't come because there's lack of liquidity from the ECB and because there's any problem. It's because the solvency ratios of existing loans in not just their core countries, but also their growth countries is eating up of their ability to improve or increase lending to the real economy. And when the real economy is at the same time weakening, the banks cannot increase their capital and at the same time lend more. They need to be much more prudent when it comes to lending. And that creates an inevitable credit crunch if provisions are not taken very, very quickly.
I think the word inevitable is very important. Sometimes it feels we're always just running away from it. Daniel, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
And the UK's new winter economy plan is out. It includes a new job support programme that allows employers to reduce worker hours. The government will pay 1/3 of the lost wages, but there is a catch. The business will also need to pay 1/3. Meaning the hourly wage rate could increase up to 66% for some of their workers.
Chancellor Rishi Sunak unveiled a 6-month plan to save UK jobs on Thursday. It will be implemented in November after the current furlough policy expires. It's part of his winter economy plan.
The government will directly support the wages of people in work, giving businesses who face depressed demand the option of keeping employees in a job on shorter hours rather than making them redundant.
Employees will get at least 77% of their full-time wage. The government contribution is capped at the equivalent of $890 per month. And in measures targeted for the tourism and hospitality sector, Sunak said he was putting the brakes on a planned January value-added tax increase.
So to support more than 150,000 businesses and help protect 2.4 million jobs through the winter, I'm announcing today that we are cancelling the planned increase and will keep the lower 5% VAT rate until March the 31st next year.
He also introduced a pay-as-you-grow program. It allows companies to extend loans from 6 to 10 years and nearly cuts the average monthly payment in half.
Businesses who are struggling can now choose to make interest-only payments, and anyone in real trouble can apply to suspend repayments altogether for up to 6 months.
The Chancellor is also allowing businesses to defer their tax bills that will fall due in March with no interest charged. He said the program won't affect businesses' credit ratings.
And France is set for new restrictions on bars and restaurants in its major cities. Follows the health minister's announcement that the virus cases there are rising again. But the new measures are being met with criticism. Our France correspondent David Vives has the details.
Already heavily hit by the lockdown this year, Paris's bars and restaurants receive another blow. The government announced a partial closure. Paris is classified as being on reinforced alert and faces new restrictions, such as closing bars and restaurants after 10 p.m.
It's now 10 p.m. for us, so in a couple of weeks, maybe a month, we'll all be closed. It's already hard for us. There are no tourists. The French tourists don't come to Paris either. Our turnover is down 50%.
Health Minister Olivier Véran on Wednesday raised the alert level for Paris, along with other major French cities. It's the second highest alert level on the government scale of risk from the virus.
These measures are very trying, but we are convinced that they are necessary.
In Marseille, in the south of France, the government ordered bars and restaurants to close for 2 weeks from this coming Saturday. The decision was made after the infection rate rose to over 250 positive cases across 100,000 inhabitants in the city. Some bars and restaurant owners were upset by the move.
It's important to note that this decision of returning to a lockdown, even a limited one, has been met with severe criticisms. Some politicians criticize the measures for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. The Marseille mayor said that Macron's government didn't inform her about the decision. She said she won't allow the people of Marseille to be victims of political decisions that no one understands. Reporting by David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
So tough for businesses. And still to come, an Australian bank agrees to pay over $900 million for money laundering. Authorities say the bank transferred money for people involved with child exploitation. And Thailand becomes the first country to go after Facebook and Twitter for failing to take down posts. The government says police can bring criminal charges against them if they don't cooperate. That and more after the break. Welcome back. An Australian bank accused of money laundering has agreed to pay $920 million to settle a lawsuit. Australian authorities say Westpac enabled millions of payments to be connected to people connected with child exploitation.
It obviously reflects very significant, serious and systemic failures on behalf of Westpac's compliance regime. That bank has now admitted to 23 million breaches of the counter-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing laws.
The bank failed to report international funds transfers worth more than $11 billion. Westpac is the second largest bank in Australia, and if the court approves the penalty, it will be Australia's biggest corporate penalty ever. And Facebook plans to launch its independent oversight board in October. It's in response to criticism about how the social media platform handles problematic content and accusations about its discrimination against conservative views.
Facebook's long-promised and much-delayed independent oversight board is finally coming together and could be ready to spring to action in mid-October, just ahead of the November U.S. presidential election. The board is charged with reviewing decisions regarding the removal of Facebook and Instagram posts. Oversight board member Alan Rusbridger, a former editor-in-chief of Britain's Guardian newspaper, told Reuters the board has been promised autonomy.
Facebook has promised they will respect our judgment on those cases of take down and leave out. So I guess if Facebook went against their word and didn't respect that promise, then that would raise serious questions about the credibility of the exercise.
Not part of the board's initial duties, reviewing complaints about what Facebook decides to leave up. Neither does it have oversight of Facebook ads or groups. That may not go down well with critics. The board was created by Facebook in response to criticism on how it handles problematic content, and that scrutiny has only grown. Advertisers and celebrities have also staged numerous boycotts, accusing Facebook of spreading and profiting from hate and misinformation. The Oversight Board will be asked to make a ruling only after a user has exhausted Facebook's appeal process. The decision will be made within 90 days or even sooner if the request is deemed as having, quote, urgent real-world consequences.
And accusations of censorship in the US, but calls for censorship in Thailand. It's going after Facebook and Twitter for ignoring requests to take down content. The minister says they filed legal complaints with cybercrime police on Thursday.
Thailand is taking legal action against Twitter and Facebook, that after they ignored requests to take down content. Digital Minister Putipong Punakanta announced the move at a news conference Thursday.
Unless the companies send their representatives to negotiate or request further information, police can bring criminal cases against them. But if they do and acknowledge the wrongdoing, we can settle on fines.
The Digital Ministry filed complaints with cybercrime police after the two firms missed a 15-day deadline to comply with takedown orders. Google avoided any action after its YouTube unit did take down videos as requested. Officials haven't disclosed details of the content at issue or specified which laws were broken. But Putipong says more takedown orders will be issued to Facebook, Twitter and Google. The minister says they will cover more than 3,000 items ranging from pornography to criticism of the monarchy.
And a group of Apple's critics are pushing for legal and regulatory action to challenge the iPhone maker's App Store practices.
Two hugely popular mobile apps are joining forces to take on Apple in a battle over its App Store purchases. The music streaming service Spotify and Fortnite creator Epic Games are banding together with several smaller developers in what they call the Coalition for App Fairness. In a tweet, the coalition said it will fight to end Apple's monopoly and level the playing field. Epic said in a tweet Thursday, developer freedoms are under attack. We are joining at App Fairness to defend and reclaim the fundamental rights of all creators.
And still to come this evening, winemakers in California face huge losses this year. Fires have tainted the region's grape harvest. More on that after the break. Welcome back. Californian winemakers are facing huge losses this year. It's after smoke from the state's devastating wildfires likely tainted this year's grape harvest. Now growers there lack the tools to test how much of the fruit is actually salvageable.
Wildfire smoke that blanketed the U.S. West Coast states has also penetrated the grapes growing in the region's vineyards. Jim Bernau, founder of Willamette Valley Vineyards, said the longer the smoke lingers, the greater the risk that it'll affect the grapes.
You know, I've been here growing wine grapes for over 38 years, and I have never experienced or seen anything like this.
Dr. Anita Oberholster at the University of California, Davis, explained the wine made from smoke-tainted grapes can taste and smell overly ashy or smoky, and it's not a flavor characteristic most people want.
These compounds don't sit on the outside of the grape, it actually absorbs into the skin, so you can't wash it off.
She's currently working on new early testing methods to tell whether smoke has affected grapes.
If we can predict better, then grape growers know, should I harvest? Should I not harvest? Winemakers know, should I buy the fruit? Should I not buy the fruit, right? It just would make everything so much easier. And we're trying our best, but it's a very, very complex issue.
It's also an expensive problem for growers. West Coast wine is worth a combined $4.5 billion. President of the California Association of Wine Grape Growers, John Aguirre, says the industry may face significant losses if good grapes are rejected for wine production, along with smoke-tainted fruit.
Bottom line is we know some grapes are smoke damaged. What we don't want is to see good fruit rejected and not processed into wine, but because we lack the tools to understand it, detect it.
Some wineries are not accepting grapes they're contracted to purchase unless tested for smoke taint. That's because the unpleasant taste or smell could seriously harm their brands.
Terrible. That's the latest business updates for today. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.